My guest today is the National Campaign Director for One Nation, Craig Kelly, and delighted to have you, Craig, again. And Craig, welcome.
Yeah, great to be with you, David. I think the last interview we did together was censored by our friends over at Facebook. So let's hope we can get through this with at some of those big people, big tech overseas, pressing the censor button on what we have to say.
Yes, I remember that. Now, you're going to talk to us about the digital ID bill, are you not? Can you
Yes,
explain
look, this is
explain what it's all about to the viewers?
right. I see people say, "Oh, look, there's already digital ID in society," and this is true. And in a world where politicians were perfect and honest and competent, and we didn't have pressure from large organizations and there was a lot of competition in all markets, a digital ID actually makes some sense. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where government wants more and more control over our lives, that wants to restrict our freedoms, to take away our ability to travel, to control what we purchase. These are all set out by the World Economic Forum. This is their policy. And extending provisions of digital ID are exactly, I think Robert Kennedy described it best, as setting up a turnkey setup for a totalitarian society. So with a flick of a switch, you can go from a free democracy to a true totalitarian society. And that's why this digital ID bill is so dangerous. It starts off with the premise that it will be voluntary and it will be safe and effective. We've heard about government before when they bring these legislation in and claim it will be voluntary. We know after time, this will be compulsory. Combined with a central bank digital currency, it will simply give government an unprecedented control over our lives.
And where could people best read about your views on this?
Look, David, my Twitter feed is probably my best. I did have a Facebook account, but during the election campaign, that I was banned for life. Even Donald Trump wasn't banned for life on Facebook. So Twitter's the place to go. Craig Kelly on Twitter, or X as it's now called, that's the best place to follow me and to keep up to date on all these issues.
Very good. And you smelled something of a rat, didn't you, in the procedure which the government did in relation to getting this into Parliament?
Well, firstly, let's go back to that. This was actually a Liberal Party idea. Now, I've seen a lot of Liberal members running around, the national members running around. This is terrible. We've got to fight. We've got to rally against this. Well, where were they in October 2021 when the Liberal Party put out a exposure draft of almost and exactly the same bill? So as we went to the 2022 election, this was a Liberal Party policy, and Labor were actually quiet on the issue. Now, as you know, what normally happens when new laws are being introduced into the federal parliament, they are introduced in the lower house, the House of Representatives, by the relevant minister who introduces them. They have the second reading speeches, they have the debates, and then it goes for a vote in the lower house, where at the moment the government has the numbers. It passes the lower house, and then it goes to our Senate. Now, our Senate is not just called the Senate, it's known as the House of Review. That is the Senate's job, to review legislation. But on this occasion, as you said, to smell a rat, the Albanese government introduced this legislation firstly into the Senate, and then they guillotined debate, and then they rushed it through without any debate on the issue to get it passed through. And now it will go back to the House of Representatives. That is not the normal procedure. And they have done that deliberately, I believe, to try and avoid public scrutiny of this bill.
And that vote on the guillotine, was that supported by members of the crossbench?
Yes, it was. It was supported by members of the crowd. That's how Labor get it through. Remember, Labor they need themselves and all the Greens and one other crossbencher to get legislation through. That's how it works. That's the numbers in the Senate today, and therefore they can horse trade. They can get one of the senators to agree to something for something else. These crossbench senators, and they voted to guillotine debate. But that's it's one thing to vote for something, but it's another thing to vote against guillotining debate. That is what we pay our politicians for. They are there in that Senate to review the legislation, to debate it, to look for unintended consequences. And this time, in this occasion, it was just guillotined through without any debate at all, without even going to the House. It was just truly a betrayal of our democratic principles.
Where
For
was
the way that
Senator? Where was Senator Pocock and Jackie Lambie on this?
They were supporting the digital ID bill.
But supporting the guillotine.
Oh, I'd have to check on the guillotine. I know, but I think one of them voted against the guillotine, even though that Labor had the numbers. And then after voting against the guillotine, they then voted for the bill that had been debated, which is just it's truly shocking. It just shows these people are not serious. They're not doing their job for the Australian public. And the Australian public, firstly, that should be the very first thing that lets you smell a rat about this bill altogether.
Well, I think it would be in the interests of the public to know precisely who voted on the guillotine and who voted for the bill, because that's a shocking thing. I think that a senator would vote to guillotine something which hadn't been discussed. There was no reason for it being rushed through, was there? What was the reason put?
Well, if you're in the Albanese government, you want this rush through because you don't want the public debate. You're right. There's no other reason. There's no great urgency in time that this needs to be done by. There's no sort of crisis that we have to get this thing legislated through, by the close of business of today, which on a rare occasion happens. There's simply no urgency, except the reason why Albanese did this. He's a wily, cunning politician, and he would remember the Australia card debate. And he would remember the similarities between, effectively, the digital ID bill is the Australia card on steroids. But if we go back to that Australia card debate, the debate bubbled away for 2 years with little traction whatsoever. And all this, once it was exposed to the mainstream public, it just exploded, and the public were totally against it. Now, I believe it's the same thing on the digital ID bill here. Remember, the Liberal Party put out an exposure draft over 2 years ago. I've been trying to talk about this and discuss this and over 2 years and haven't got any traction whatsoever. So the Labor Party tried to sneak it through without getting into the public format and discussion. So they did that. Let's put it through the Senate where we don't have the numbers and where some of these independent crossbench senators may sort of smell the public sentiment out there and decide this, hang on, this is not what the public want. So they didn't allow that to happen. Rush it through the Senate, guillotine debate, limit the debate to nothing, push it through. And then when it goes to the House of Reps, the government have got the numbers and the debate is really just irrelevant. It's just for semantics. That's all.
This is a very worrying matter, and it's very good that you've raised this. Senator Hanson has spoken on this, has she not, in the Senate?
Oh, she has, yes. Outside of the bill, the normal debate itself and other processes in the House, she has spoken very loudly against it. She made it very clear that One Nation, as our policy, will oppose this. Malcolm Roberts has spoken about it too, the dangers of this bill. It simply goes back to the fundamental structure of your society. In our society, do we want a society where it is the people holding the government accountable and where the government should be fully transparent about what they are doing? Or is it where the government is in control and they want to make sure they're supervising what all the citizens are doing?
No.
It's a recipe for big government intrusion. And as you said, it sets up so many dangerous precedents of issues that we have to tackle in the years ahead.
And Craig, just before you go, can you tell us again where we should go to read what you've been saying about this?
Certainly on X, or as it was formerly known as Twitter, just Craig Kelly. You'll see it there. I've got about 120,000 people following my page.
Excellent.
It's one of the most followed political pages in the country. So just Craig Kelly on Twitter or X. That's the best place to follow.
Well, we'll mention that, and thank you very much for drawing our attention to this. It's obviously something we should be looking at closely. I did notice it when Pauline was talking about it, but I thought when it went through the Senate, it must have been passed by the House, because I assumed that they'd done it in the right process. Good. Well, thank you very much.
Well, David, what that shows is how the mainstream media is running dead on this issue, how they don't want the public to debate that, because they are all on, we know the mainstream media is all on side with a lot of these globalist agendas. And we've got public protests up about this very soon. So If people follow my Twitter page, they'll see the details of these public protests that we have coming up, and people can get out there and reject this digital ID.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for taking this important issue on board. Craig Kelly, National Campaign
Thanks,
Director for One Nation. Thank you, Craig.